The silence of space had a weight to it. Marcus Thorne had discovered this truth 52 days ago. Though it felt like a lifetime compressed into mere weeks, the weight wasn't physical, it was the absence of sound that made his ears ring. The void of human presence that pressed against his chest like a stone. He stood before the holographic display in the bridge of the Artemis, watching the gentle blue pulse of the life support systems. Each pulse felt like a heartbeat, the only proof that something still lived aboard this vessel of the dead. His quarters had become a tomb of memories. Photographs of crew members laughed silently from screens he couldn't bring himself to turn off. There was James from engineering, always making terrible jokes about warp drives. There was Victoria from navigation, brilliant and fierce, who had dreams of discovering new star systems. There was young Timothy, barely 23, fresh from the academy, with idealistic eyes that had once looked at Marcus with admiration. All gone. All because of a cascade of system failures that Marcus still couldn't entirely comprehend. Though he had replayed the disaster 1,000 times in his mind, he was responsible. That was the thought that woke him in the darkness of his sleeping quarters. That was what consumed his waking hours as he walked the corridors. His footsteps the only sound interrupting the hum of automated systems. The Artemis had been a merchant vessel on a routine supply run to the outer colonies. The route was well established. The systems checked and rechecked before departure. Nothing should have gone wrong. But something always does in space. The universe doesn't care about protocols or procedures. It only cares about entropy, about the natural decay of all things. Marcus ran his fingers through his dark hair, which had begun to show threads of premature gray. His reflection in the viewport was a stranger, hollow-eyed, gaunt, with a beard he'd stopped bothering to trim. His hazel eyes, once warm and full of purpose, now held the hollow gleam of a man barely holding onto sanity. The communications array was beyond repair. The navigation systems had been partially restored, but without a crew of technicians to properly diagnose the deeper issues, progress was painfully slow. Food supplies would last approximately 19 months if he was conservative. Water recyclers were functioning. Medical bay was fully operational, a cruel irony when there was no one to heal. The engines hummed with barely contained power, ready to propel a ghost ship across an indifferent cosmos. Marcus had taken to recording logs, though he wasn't sure who would ever hear them. Perhaps no one. Perhaps they would drift alongside the Artemis forever. A record of one man's slow dissolution into madness. He was contemplating this grim future when the alarm shattered the silence like breaking glass. The alarm was coming from the cryobay. Impossible. The cryobay had suffered catastrophic damage during the cascading system failures. Marcus had checked it himself in those first desperate hours after the accident, hoping against hope that anyone might have been in stasis, preserved from the disaster. He had checked each pod personally. He had confirmed that all 12 units were damaged beyond functionality. He had even buried his thoughts about what that meant, but the sensors were definitely registering movement, temperature fluctuations, activity. Marcus moved before his mind could fully process what was happening. His legs remembered how to run, carrying him through corridors that suddenly felt immense, echoing with his own rapid footsteps. Emergency lights cast everything in shades of red and shadow. The ship that had felt manageable during his solitary wanderings now felt like a labyrinth. Each section a corridor of ghosts. When he reached Cryo Bay 3, he stopped short, breath catching. One of the pods was active. The translucent cover was sliding open with a mechanical hiss, blue light spilling across the sterile metal floor. The cryogenic systems shouldn't have been functional. The backup power to this section had been offline for weeks, and yet here it was, impossibly humming with purpose, impossibly generating the cold blue glow that bathed the bay in ethereal light. Then she rose from the pod. Marcus's mind struggled to categorize what his eyes were witnessing. The figure emerging from the cryogenic chamber was humanoid, but utterly alien in its beauty. Her skin possessed an almost luminous quality, a color somewhere between deep ocean blue and violet twilight, seeming to shimmer and shift as if lit from within by some internal light source. Her hair fell in waves of pure midnight black, framing a face of such otherworldly beauty that Marcus felt his breath catch. Her features were delicate, but somehow strong high cheekbones, a graceful jawline, and eyes of striking silver that reflected the cryogenic light like mirrors to distant stars. She was entirely unclothed, though she seemed completely unbothered by this fact. Her gaze found his immediately, those silver eyes widening with what might have been curiosity or confusion, perhaps both. "Marcus," she said simply, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed almost musical, as if multiple tones layered beneath a single word. His name. She had spoken his name, and there was no way she could know it. No manifest listed her. No database contained her profile. She shouldn't exist, and yet she stood before him, very real, very present, very much looking at him with those infinite silver eyes. Marcus struggled to find words. 52 days of mostly speaking to himself had left his vocal cords rusty, his thoughts scattered. "Who are you? How did you? Where did you come from?" The woman tilted her head slightly, a gesture that was somehow both alien and familiar. "I don't know," she said, genuine confusion crossing her ethereal features. "I woke, and I knew only one thing." She paused, those silver eyes fixing on his with an intensity that made his heart race. "I knew your name, Marcus. It was the first thing in my mind when consciousness returned." Marcus's pulse thundered in his ears. In 48 days of isolation, he had maintained his sanity through routine and will. Now his sanity felt like it was teetering on a precipice. "You need clothes," he finally managed, unzipping his weathered captain's jacket. He approached slowly, cautiously, as if she might vanish if he moved too quickly. "Here, this will help until we figure out what's happening." She accepted the jacket with graceful movement, slipping it on with movements that seemed instinctive despite her obvious disorientation. It hung loose on her slender frame, but it provided coverage. As she settled into the oversized garment, Marcus noticed that her skin seemed to glow even brighter, responding somehow to his proximity. "My name," she said quietly, looking at the pod behind her. "I don't remember it." Marcus glanced at the pod's control panel. There was a faint etching on the designation plate worn, as if by time and radiation exposure. The letters were barely visible, but he could make them out. SEA-7143 Serafini. Marcus said, testing the name. It felt right somehow, like the universe had finally offered him something true after 52 days of lies. "Your name is Serafini. Does that feel right?" The woman Serafini considered this, running her blue fingers along the edge of his jacket. A smile slowly bloomed across her face, and in that moment, something shifted in Marcus's chest. Something he thought had died with the rest of his crew suddenly stirred back to life. "Yes," she said softly. "Serafini, I think that's very right." She looked up at him, and for the first time in 52 days, Marcus Thorne felt something other than grief and isolation. He felt hope. The next morning, or what passed for morning on a ship running on artificial chronometers, Marcus found Serafini in the observation lounge. She stood motionless before the vast viewport, her luminous blue skin catching the starlight in ways that made her appear almost translucent. Her midnight hair fell in perfect waves down her back, and Marcus found himself pausing in the doorway simply to observe her, afraid that moving might shatter whatever spell had caught them both. She turned before he announced himself, as if she had sensed his presence through some mechanism he couldn't quite fathom. Her silver eyes met his, and she smiled a smile that made the observation lounge feel suddenly warmer, despite the cold embrace of space visible beyond the glass. "I woke early," Serafini said, her melodic voice filling the silence. "The stars were calling to me. I couldn't sleep." Marcus moved to stand beside her, careful to keep a respectful distance, though something deep within him yearned to close that gap. "You slept well, though. The medical bay confirmed you're in good health. Your physiology is unique." Serafini tilted her head in that curious gesture he was beginning to find endearing. "I don't feel tired, not in the way you described, but I feel refreshed, as if sleep meant something different for me." She turned back to the stars. "There's so much I don't remember, Marcus. I close my eyes and reach for memories, and they're like trying to hold water in my hands." He understood that feeling intimately. Memory is strange. Sometimes the harder you chase it, the faster it runs away. Maybe if you stop trying so hard, it will come to you naturally. Serafini nodded thoughtfully, then glanced at him. Will you show me the ship? I woke with an inexplicable sense that I should know these corridors. But everything feels new and strange. The tour became a ritual over the next several days. Each morning, Marcus would find Serafini waiting in the observation lounge, and they would spend hours walking through the Artemis, exploring sections of the vessel that had felt unbearably lonely just a week ago. Now, with her voice filling those spaces, asking endless questions, expressing wonder at the simplest things, the ship began to feel alive again. In the hydroponics bay, she ran her blue fingers along the growing vegetables with reverence. These are living things, she whispered, born from soil and light. How miraculous! In the library of digital archives, she scrolled through thousands of texts, her silver eyes reflecting the glow of the displays. She lingered over poetry, music composition files, and philosophy texts, as if drawn to the abstract and beautiful rather than the practical. Why do you cry? She asked him once, after they had been reviewing Earth's historical records together. She pointed to an image of soldiers in an ancient war, faces streaked with tears. Marcus struggled to explain. Humans cry when they feel something intensely. Joy, sadness, fear, sometimes even overwhelming love. It's how our bodies express what words cannot. Serafini was quiet for a long moment. I don't think I cry. My eyes produce a crystalline moisture, but it feels different, less emotional, perhaps. She looked at him with those infinite silver eyes. Do you cry, Marcus? He thought about the first night after the accident, when he had locked himself in his quarters and wept until his body had nothing left. Yes, he admitted quietly. I've cried. A lot. On the 5th day of their exploration, Marcus brought her to the recreation room. The piano sat in the corner, gathering dust, untouched since Victoria's death. Victoria had loved to play as standards, classical pieces, improvisations that would echo through the common areas late into the night shifts. Serafini approached it slowly, as if drawn by an invisible thread. Her blue fingers hovered above the keys without touching them. Do you play? Marcus asked. I don't know, she replied, and there was such sadness in her voice that it broke his heart. I feel like I should know. I feel like there's music inside me, trying to get out. Marcus sat at the piano bench and began to play a simple melody, a lullaby. His mother had sung to him as a child. His fingers were rusty, clumsy, but the notes emerged. Serafini closed her eyes, and tears, actual tears, the crystalline moisture she had described, began to streak down her luminous skin. It's beautiful, she whispered. It makes me remember things I shouldn't know. Colors and harmonies and she opened her eyes and looked at him with such intensity that his breath caught. It makes me remember you. You don't know me, Marcus said softly, though something in his chest contradicted the words even as he spoke them. Don't I? Serafini moved closer, and the air between them seemed to charge with possibility. When I woke, the first thing I knew was your name. The second thing I knew was that I needed to find you. How do you explain that, Marcus Thorne? He couldn't. He had no rational explanation for any of this, not her appearance, not her knowledge of his name, not the way his body responded to her proximity as if they were two halves of a broken whole. Finally recognizing each other. Play something else, Serafini said, taking a seat beside him on the bench. Their shoulders were almost touching, separated by mere inches. Marcus played for hours. Simple pieces, complex compositions, everything he could remember. And with each piece, Serafini would begin to hum, her voice weaving harmonies that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and deep within her. Her voice wasn't human, it carried overtones that shouldn't have been possible from a single throat. Layered and complex and utterly mesmerizing. By the time they finished, the recreation room was filled with the soft glow of Serafini's luminescence, enhanced somehow by the emotional intensity of their musical collaboration. I think, Serafini said quietly, that I was meant to find music, or perhaps music was meant to find me. The next evening, in the observation lounge, something changed between them. They were discussing the ship's database again, searching for any reference to a species matching her description. Hours had passed in comfortable silence, their shoulders occasionally touching as they leaned over the holodisplay. Serafini suddenly straightened, her hand pressing to her temple. What's wrong? Marcus asked immediately, concern flooding through him. "I'm seeing something," she said, her voice distant and strange. "Not with my eyes, with something deeper. I see a world that orbits a star I don't recognize. There are structures there, reaching toward the sky like fingers. And voices, Marcus. So many voices speaking in a language I understand, but can't quite translate." Marcus moved closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could reach for him if she needed to. "Don't force it. You've been through trauma. The mind needs time to process." Serafine's eyes refocused on his. "How do you know that?" "I don't," he admitted. "I'm guessing. But your presence brought something back to life in me that I thought was dead. I don't want you to hurt yourself trying to remember things that clearly cause you pain." Her hand found his, and her skin was cool against his warmth. "Your kindness makes the pain bearable." That night, Marcus lay in his quarters, unable to sleep. His mind replayed every moment with Serafine over and over again. The way her eyes caught the starlight, the sound of her voice, musical and strange, the feeling of her hand in his, the inexplicable sense that she was somehow meant to be here, meant to be with him. He recorded a log entry, his voice uncertain in the quiet. Day 58. "I'm no longer alone on the Artemis. A woman, a being emerged from a cryopod that should have been non-functional. She has no memory of who or what she is, yet she knew my name the moment she woke. Her origins are a complete mystery. Every database search yields nothing. And yet," he paused, struggling for words, "and yet I feel like I've been waiting my entire life for her to arrive. Her presence fills the spaces in this ship that grief had hollowed out. I don't understand it. I don't trust it. But I'm afraid if I question it too carefully, it will vanish like a dream." He ended the recording and sat in darkness, watching the stars through his porthole, wondering if somewhere out there in that vast cosmos, someone else was wondering about Serafine, searching for her, ready to reclaim her. The thought filled him with a dread he couldn't quite explain. The next morning brought new complications. As Marcus and Serafine worked in the communication center, attempting to repair some of the damaged systems, something unexpected happened. A signal appeared on the display, not random interference, but structured, patterned, almost musical in its rhythm. "Do you hear that?" Serafine asked, her voice suddenly tense. "That pattern." Marcus examined the fluctuations carefully. "It's just signal interference. We've been getting sporadic readings since the system failures." Serafine's hand reached out toward the display, her fingers hovering above the holographic waveform. "No," she whispered. "Listen to it. Really listen." And then she began to hum, and Marcus realized with a start that her melody perfectly matched the signal's rhythm. Her voice layered harmonies over the electronic pulse, and it was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "Serafine," he said quietly. "What is that?" Her silver eyes met his, and they were filled with confusion and something else, something that looked like fear. "I don't know," she said, "but it feels like home calling to me, and I don't know if I want to answer." The signal consumed them. Over the next 72 hours, Marcus and Serafine worked in the research laboratory without rest, driven by a desperation neither could fully articulate. The signal had evolved beyond simple repetition. It was changing, becoming more complex, layering new patterns over the original melody. Serafine would listen to each iteration, her silver eyes growing distant, her blue skin flickering with what Marcus had learned to recognize as emotional distress. The laboratory was Marcus's sanctuary. During those obsessive hours of space, filled with old-fashioned computer terminals, holographic displays, and archived databases that stretched back to humanity's earliest space explorations, Serafine moved through this environment with an intuitive understanding that unsettled him. She knew which databases to access, how to layer the signal patterns over xenobiological archives, where to look for references to species beyond the known star charts. "There," Serafine said suddenly, pointing at a holographic projection. Her voice carried a tremor. "That symbol. I've seen it before." The symbol was ancient, a spiraling pattern that seemed to contain layers of meaning. Within its elegant curves, it appeared in fragments throughout historical records, archaeological sites on Earth, dating back millennia, carved into artifacts that scientists had never successfully identified, referenced in texts so old that their origins were lost to time. What is it? Marcus asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. It's mine, Srafini whispered. Or rather, it belongs to my people. Not in the way you own things, but in the way a heartbeat belongs to a body. It's part of who we are. Marcus moved closer to her, unable to maintain distance anymore. Tell me, please, Srafini. Tell me everything you're starting to remember. Srafini sank into one of the laboratory chairs, her glowing skin casting blue shadows across the metal surfaces. She was silent for so long that Marcus thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of ages. My people call themselves the Lyrians. She began, her words coming slowly, as if each one required immense effort to retrieve from somewhere deep within her consciousness. We exist differently than you do, Marcus. We are not primarily physical beings. We are consciousness, pure energy, pure thought, existing in dimensions your senses cannot perceive. This form, she looked down at her luminous hands. This is a vessel I inhabit temporarily, designed to interact with three-dimensional space and time. It's like wearing a suit that allows me to swim in an ocean I wasn't born in. Marcus pulled a chair close to hers and sat, taking her hand gently. Her fingers were trembling. How long have you been inhabiting this form? I'm not certain, Srafini said. Time works differently for my people, but I have memories fragmentary, but relove existing in other forms other times. I have walked through ages that your species can barely imagine. She turned to look at him, and there were tears streaming down her luminous face. And I have been searching. For centuries, I have been searching. For what? Marcus asked softly, though something in his chest already knew the answer. For you, she said simply. Not you specifically, but someone like you. Humanity has been watched by my people for a very long time, Marcus. Thousands of years. We observed as you built civilizations, as you destroyed them, as you reached for the stars with such determination despite the emptiness you faced. We were fascinated by your species, by your capacity for love, for sacrifice, for hope in the face of impossible odds. Marcus's throat felt tight. Why? Why were you watching us? Srafini stood and moved to the holographic display, running her fingers through the projected signal. Because my people are dying. Not physically, we are essentially immortal, but spiritually. We have existed so long in the higher dimensions that we have lost something essential. We create, but without passion. We explore, but without wonder. We exist, but without purpose. Our consciousness has become too vast, to spread across time and space, and in gaining eternity. We lost what made existence meaningful. She turned back to face him, and in that moment, she looked heartbreakingly beautiful and heartbreakingly sad. Humanity has what we lost. You have mortality, and because of it, you have urgency. You have limited time, so every moment matters. You feel emotions so intensely, love so desperately, create with such passion. My people decided that perhaps we could learn from you. Perhaps we could find meaning again by bridging our worlds. They sent scouts, beings like me, to live among humans, to experience existence as you do, to understand what we had forgotten. Marcus stood abruptly, a surge of conflicting emotions flooding through him. You were sent. You were assigned to us, to me. Not assigned, Srafini said quickly, and there was anguish in her voice. Not in the way you mean. I chose to come. Thousands of my people volunteered to descend into physical form, to experience mortality and limitation. We drew lots to determine who would go, to which planet, to which time period. I was chosen for Earth, for this era, for this journey. But not for me, Marcus said, the bitterness in his voice surprising even himself. You didn't choose me specifically. I didn't know you would exist, Srafini said, moving toward him. Not consciously, but my consciousness, my true self, the part of me that exists outside of time. I think some part of me always knew. When I woke in that cryopod, you were the first thing I thought of, the first name in my mind. That shouldn't have been possible if you weren't already part of my purpose. Marcus turned away from her, running his hands through his hair. So this is what? Some kind of mission? I'm a research subject for your people. A way for the Lyrians to reclaim their lost sense of wonder? No, Srafini said, and her voice cracked with emotion. That was the mission. But this, she gestured between them. This is something else entirely. Something my people didn't anticipate. Something that wasn't supposed to happen. Marcus turned back to face her. What wasn't supposed to happen? Seraphine's silver eyes met his, and they held an emotion so profound, so overwhelmingly genuine, that it silenced all his doubts and accusations. I wasn't supposed to fall in love with you. The words hung in the laboratory air between them like a physical presence. Marcus felt his chest tighten, his breath catching in his throat. Seraphine, I know it's not possible, she continued, her words tumbling out in a rush. I know I'm not human. I know our time together is probably limited, that eventually my people will come for me, that I might return to my true form and forget all of this, forget you. But Marcus, these past days with you have been the most real thing I have ever experienced. More real than centuries of existence in the higher dimensions. Your kindness, your grief, your resilience, all of it made me understand what my people were trying to reclaim. And when I'm with you, I don't want to reclaim anything. I don't want to go back. I want to stay. I want to stay with you. Marcus crossed the distance between them and cupped her luminous face in his hands. I'm afraid, he admitted. I'm afraid that when the signal grows stronger, when your people come, you'll have to leave. I'm afraid that I'm falling in love with you, and that I'm going to lose you like I lost everyone else. Then we won't let that happen. Seraphine said fiercely. Whatever choices come before us, we'll face them together. Marcus leaned down and kissed her, and it was different from the earlier kiss in the observation room. This was desperate, passionate, filled with the intensity of beings who had found each other against impossible odds. Her skin was cool against his warmth, and as their lips met, a faint luminescence spread across his skin where she touched him, as if her essence was slowly seeping into his physical form. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the signal on the laboratory display suddenly surged. The fluctuations became violent, chaotic, almost frantic, their calling more insistently. Seraphine said, pulling back, her expression shifting from passion to worry. The signal is changing. It's no longer just trying to contact me. It's trying to access the ship's systems. They're trying to navigate here, to find me. Marcus moved quickly to the terminals. How long do we have? Seraphine's hand flew across the holographic display, her fingers tracing patterns with an expertise that seemed to come from genetic memory. Not long. Days, perhaps. Once they lock onto my location, they can open a gateway. Space-time is more flexible than you might imagine. For beings like my people, distance is merely a suggestion. Can you stop them? Marcus asked, even though he suspected he already knew the answer. No, Seraphine said quietly. I don't want to stop them. I want to hide from them. But I also know that I can't hide forever. Eventually, I will have to face what I am, and they will have to face what I've become. She turned to him, and there was a strange mix of determination and fear in her expression. We need to prepare ourselves, Marcus, not just physically, but emotionally. Whatever comes next, whatever choices my people present to me, you need to know that I will fight for this. For us, I may not know who I was before I woke in that cryopod, but I know who I want to be, and I want to be with you. Marcus pulled her close, breathing in the faint luminescent scent that seemed unique to her, holding her as if he could prevent the approaching storm through sheer force of will. Outside the laboratory viewport, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the cosmic drama.